Keeping you in touch around the clock now on BBC One. You're watching BBC News 24.
You're watching BBC News 24. The latest news at 1:30. The Northern Ireland First Minister, David Trimble, will meet the leader of Sinn Féin, Gerry Adams. The Ulster Unionist Party executive today agreed the unprecedented face-to-face meeting could go ahead next week. The announcement comes on the day the Omagh bomb claimed its 29th victim. President Clinton has been given a warm send-off at the end of his 3-day trip to Ireland. In Limerick, earlier today, he made an impassioned appeal in support of the peace process. Canadian authorities have released details of the final conversation between air traffic control and Swissair Flight 111 before it plunged into the sea, killing all 229 people aboard. More than 300 relatives are mourning together at Peggy's Cove, close to where the plane went down. It was en route from New York to Geneva when it crashed. Problems for the Russian ruble continue, with Russian leaders saying they'll print their way out of trouble. Next week, European delegates will go to Moscow to discuss solutions to the growing economic crisis. A report on Modernizing the monarchy, to be published on Monday, calls for a comprehensive act of monarchy which would radically change the sovereign's role. It's by an independent research institute, Demos, and suggests that the monarchy should be stripped of its constitutional powers. It also argues for a referendum to be held whenever a new sovereign takes the throne.
The researchers at Demos contend that the British monarchy appears confused about its identity because it's trying to fulfil too many roles, when its primary function should be symbolic. It believes that the sovereign's political powers and ties with Parliament should be abandoned. Responsibility for the appointment of the Prime Minister and the formal dissolution of Parliament should be transferred to the Speaker of the Commons, who would also authorise the passing of bills, which now require the royal assent. It argues that the monarch should no longer be supreme governor of the Church of England because, as such, he or she cannot represent the nation at large. And to prove that the sovereign has the support of the people, it suggests that there should be a referendum both at the start of each new reign and whenever subsequently deemed appropriate. In the week when Prince Harry started at Eton, it also suggests that the royal family should make a point of using public institutions, such as state schools and NHS hospitals, wherever possible. All of this and more it wants enshrined in a Monarchy Act. The report's co-author insists that the aim is not to abolish, but to strengthen the institution.
This isn't some way of turning us into a republic by the back door. It's just a way of giving the monarchy the tools they need to be able to stand up and say, I'm here because the people support me, which is what the Queen herself actually said on her golden wedding anniversary, when she said that they had to be there because of the support of the British people.
Officials at Buckingham Palace will no doubt study the report with interest, but they stress that any issue of constitutional reform is a matter for Parliament. Jenny Bond, BBC News.
President Clinton has returned to the United States after his 3-day trip to Ireland. Hailed as a catalyst to the peace process, the visit ended with a round of golf at the Ballybunion course in County Kerry. Meanwhile, the Ulster Unionists agreed to a face-to-face meeting between David Trimble and Sinn Féin's Gerry Adams.
Obviously relishing his welcome, President Clinton's arrival in Limerick before 30,000 people was that of a hero of the Irish peace process.
Because of what you have done in Ireland in 1998, you have made it possible for me, on behalf of the United States and the cause of peace in the world, to tell every warring, feuding, hating group of people trapped in the prison of their past conflicts to look at Ireland and know there can be a better day. Thank you for that.
And with the cheers ringing out in Limerick, politicians north of the border were taking the next step forward in the peace process. First Minister-elect David Trimble was seeking the views of his party on a face-to-face meeting with Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams, possible only after Mr. Adams' complete disavowal of violence as part of the Republican struggle. In the end, it was reported that there were no dissenting voices within the meeting.
We all want to see stable government. We all want to see peace returned to Northern Ireland. There is a contribution that Gerry Adams can make, and we want to make sure that that is done.
But with bilateral talks expected to take place next Tuesday, not everyone was yet convinced.
Well, I'm unhappy with the bilateral meeting, I have to say, because I feel that Sinn Féin have to do a lot more than just say in words that they are going to do something, because if you come from where I come from, you need more than words to blur out what they have been doing over the past 30 years.
And as if to underline the continued tension that exists, an afternoon of petrol bombs and rioting set fire to a shop and sent shoppers fleeing in the centre of Portadown. Loyalist and nationalist groups have now been separated. Today's trouble surrounded the latest Loyalist march. But it's the banning of the Orange Order parade at Drumcree that has left a cloud of animosity hanging over the area. Nevertheless, the enduring images of the day were of President Clinton relaxed on his last day in Ireland. The 200-yard tee shot fulfilling a promise made 3 years ago to play a round at Ballybunion after his last visit was cut short.
Bill Clinton has done an awful lot for the peace process, and I think it was right that he came north and south on this occasion, and it's a further catalyst, I believe, in what we're all trying to achieve.
A verdict echoed by the Irish Prime Minister Bertie Ahern, who said that new momentum had been injected into the peace process. Looking back then, a good day for a president returning to his deepest political crisis yet, as the Monica Lewinsky affair continues to unfold. David Sidito, BBC News.
English football fans have been involved in skirmishes with Swedish riot police as they left a Stockholm stadium tonight. Several windows were broken inside the arena by some fans following England's 2-1 defeat by Sweden in a European Championship qualifier. 11 people have been arrested. The Tottenham coach, Christian Gross, has been sacked. His departure means David Pleat and Chris Hughton are now in temporary charge. He arrived at Spurs last November from the Swiss champions Grasshopper Zurich, but he's been under increasing pressure after a poor start to the season. Despite winning against Everton last Saturday, it appears the club had already decided he should go. No replacement has yet been named. The value of cocaine found on board a yacht in the Irish Republic leapt to at least £24 million after a third on-board discovery of the drug. More than 300 kilograms has been located so far on board a 50-foot Spanish-registered catamaran since it put into the County Cork port of Kinsale yesterday after a voyage from the Caribbean en route to Britain. Teaching unions have expressed concern at the prospect of a failing state school in Surrey becoming the first in the country to be taken over by a private company. Councillors will decide on Monday whether to close King's Manor Comprehensive in Guildford or invite offers to run it.
180 new pupils should be starting at King's Manor School this term, but after failing its inspection, the school has filled only 1/3 of its first-year places. The council has tried relaunching it before and now feels there are only two options: closure or asking a private company to run it.
We feel we've got to launch this school in a new way and some new ideas, innovative ideas. And we think the private sector's got something good to offer here. We're not worried about whether they make a profit. That's up to them. We just want the best for those children.
A public for which it stands.
The Edison Project, a for-profit company running state schools in America, is one of 3 education businesses interested in Surrey's idea. It makes money by running schools more efficiently or cheaply than the local education authority. No state school in Britain is run by a private company, although the government has encouraged business to be involved in the new education action zones. But under pressure from unions, ministers have promised that no private company will be allowed to profit from running state schools.
We're concerned about private companies taking over schools, state schools, for the purposes of profit. We secured a commitment from David Blunkett that that would not happen with education action zones. We want him to reaffirm his commitment in relation to this school.
Surrey's Education Committee decides on Monday whether to pursue the private sector option for King's Manor School. If it does, the government faces the difficult decision of whether to support such a radical step. Mike Baker, BBC News.
An investigation is underway after hundreds of fish died in a Derbyshire lake. Officials from the Environment Agency have begun clearing the fish away from the village of Tibshelf. It's thought they were poisoned after waste beer, which had been dumped on nearby farmland, seeped into the water. An Environment Agency spokesman says a prosecution may follow. The European Space Agency has unveiled its most advanced satellite ever. The £1.3 billion EnviSat will be launched into space in the year 2000. and will provide scientists with invaluable data about our environment.
6 years in the making, Envisat will be the most powerful eye on Earth the world has ever known. It will monitor the planet in a kind of detail no other satellite has yet achieved. Once in orbit, its massive 10-metre radar will map the planet grid by grid, answering questions about our most pressing environmental and climatic problems. The 8-ton platform, the size of a double-decker bus, will monitor the hole in the ozone layer and help determine whether global warming is actually taking place.
It's going to look at the Earth as a whole system. We're going to find out how the atmosphere interacts with the oceans, interacts with the land, whether the ice is melting, whether the sea levels are going to rise. It's about our future and how habitable this planet's going to be.
With the El Niño ocean effect said to be just one phenomenon responsible for recent weather like this, Envisat has some huge and urgent questions to answer.
3, 2, 1, top.
The satellite will be launched in the year 2000 on board the French Ariane 5 rocket. A joint European project, it's costing £1.3 billion. Those involved say its mission is no less than to help humanity to cope with flood, famine and disaster. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News, Farnborough.
The royal family, who are on holiday at Balmoral, have spent the day at the Bremer Highland Games. With 16,000 other spectators, they watched displays of Highland dancing, a march by the massed pipes and drums of local bands, and other traditional events, such as tossing the caber. The winning numbers in last night's national lottery draw are 9, 10, 11, 27, 42 and 47. The bonus number was 8. The jackpot of just over £7 million will be shared by 5 winning tickets. The headlines at 1:41. President Clinton says goodbye to his hosts in the Republic of Ireland. And north of the border, First Minister David Trimble says he will meet Sinn Féin leader Gerry Adams for talks next week. Two policemen have been injured in a blast bomb attack in Portadown during clashes between unionists and nationalists. It's not yet clear how seriously they've been hurt. Swiss air crash investigators say relatives of the victims will soon start to identify their loved ones. You're watching BBC News 24.
What we think of Britain? A great place, a great nation.
Good.
British politics still emphasizes traditions.
I am very happy in this country.
I've been watching the telly 24 hours a day because I haven't slept very well.
Do they mean us? A foreign view of British life and politics, Dateline London, Monday 4:30 on BBC News 24.
The BBC. Oh, it's beautiful.
And now to a roundup of the day's sport with Barry Milnes.
Hello again. The Sunday papers are bound to have a field day with 2 stories: defeat for Glenn Hoddle's England and the departure of Christian Gross from Tottenham. England made a bad start to their Group 5 qualifying campaign for the 2000 European Championship. They lost to Sweden 2-1 in Stockholm, Andreas Andersson and Johan Mjällby scoring for the home team after Alan Shearer had given England the early lead. Paul Ince was sent off in the second half for a second bookable offence.
Disappointed. We all are. We all felt that we could come here and get a result and put on a good performance. And I said to the press the other day that it was going to be tough because of 1 or 2 people might have still had it in the back of their minds, the Argentina game. Whether that was the case or not, I don't know, but we had the ideal opportunity to get rid of those thoughts in the first minute when we scored.
Scotland began their Euro 2000 campaign with a goalless draw against Lithuania in Vilnius. Wales were beaten 2-0 by Italy at Anfield. Having done well to hold the visitors for almost 20 minutes, this unfortunate mix-up in the Welsh defence allowed Diego Fuser to put one past Paul Jones. And with 14 minutes remaining, Dino's offside made certain, Roberto Baggio setting up Christian Vieri to split the defence once more and score Italy's second.
First goal was a little bit disappointing from the aspect of weathering the storm and battling it out with a very physical Italian side in the first 20 minutes. Ryan Giggs' free kick, a run in the second half by Ryan, and the lads a little bit disappointed at conceding the second goal, which was a wonderful constructed goal. And on the back of that, we still continue to fight and gave them problems.
Bad news too for Laurie McMenamin's Northern Ireland, who lost 3-0 to Turkey in Istanbul. But joy for the Republic of Ireland in Group 8. Having missed out on France 98, they beat World Cup semi-finalist Croatia 2-0 in a stormy match in Dublin. Dennis Irwin and Roy Keane were the goal scorers. Stamic and Jurcic were sent off late in the game. And one other result to mention, the world champions France could only scrape a 1-1 draw in Iceland. The other top football story now, Tottenham's coach Christian Gross has left the club. Director of Football David Pleat will take temporary charge. Gross's departure follows the club's poor start to the season, although Spurs won their last match away to Everton last Saturday. Chairman Alan Sugar reportedly wanted to sell the club last week. Now there's speculation he may bring former German international captain Jürgen Klinsmann back to White Hart Lane as coach. The NatWest Trophy cricket final between Lancashire and Derbyshire will go into a second day after rain delayed the start by 6 hours. After being put into bat, Derbyshire ended the day on 92 for 7 after 32 overs. 4 wickets for Peter Martin and 3 for Ian Austin.
11 of the last 12 captains who've won the toss have lifted the NatWest Trophy. Wasim Akram called it right and put Derbyshire in. Having declared himself fit, Mike Atherton would have to wait to open. Derbyshire's Australian opener Michael Slater set about proving history was no guide to the outcome. He seemed to be suffering no jet lag from his flight from Sydney yesterday. But Lancashire's one-day specialist Ian Austin checked that early flow of runs, removing Slater in the 19th over. And once that prize wicket went down, the floodgates opened. Veteran Kim Barnett was next as Peter Martin got in the act. Robin Weston hadn't scored a run when he played on to Austin. And when Adrian Rollins was removed, Lancashire had taken 4 wickets for just 1 run. Young Ben Spendlove has had an outstanding season, but he was caught in Martin's web as well, and Derbyshire had soon crumbled to 81 for 6. Matt Cassar trying to hit his way out of trouble. Veteran Phil de Freitas was back in the pavilion almost as soon as he left. Lancashire are heading for their second NatWest Trophy in 3 years. History appears to have repeated itself. Surely only the weather can save Derbyshire now. Ed Marriage, BBC News.
Finally, Richie Woodall has successfully defended his WBC World Super Middleweight title. Woodall beat fellow Briton Glenn Catley on points at Telford. And that's the sport for now.
Thanks, Barry. A round of golf at the Ballybunion Golf Course in County Kerry was how President Clinton ended his 3-day trip to Ireland. He has returned home, with the trip being hailed as a catalyst to the peace process. The former Irish Foreign Minister Dick Spring was the man who invited the President to finish the visit with a round of golf. Earlier, our reporter Robert Hall caught up with him.
Dick Spring, welcome, and let's just spell this out, because it was very much your work, wasn't it, that got him back here?
Well, it was. It was an invitation I issued about 4 years ago to come play Ballybunion. As you know, in his first trip to Ireland, we almost played Ballybunion, and certainly in subsequent conversations it always came up. I think I had sold Ballybunion to him as a great golf course, and I'm certainly honoured that he made it here today.
It's not an easy course. There's some tricky moments, particularly for that first tee. We were all waiting to see whether we'd end up with photos in the cemetery. Any sign of the problems on his mind as he played?
No, absolutely none. And that was the intention, that once we got on the first tee, we went out there to enjoy ourselves. We had some good golf, some less than good golf. But overall, I think the President certainly enjoyed 4.5 hours of relaxation in County Kerry.
Something he could be glad of under the circumstances, isn't it?
Well, I think in the world of politics, I mean, there's no leader in any country at the present time that isn't under a certain amount of pressure. President Clinton out there today was the most relaxed man, I think, on the course.
What about his golf? A lot of people were talking about a handicap, I've heard, between 14 and 20.
Yeah, that's about right.
And what about the...
he played, quite honestly, I think he hadn't played golf for a month. The first 9 he was loosening up quite a bit, but certainly played some good golf in the back 9, and a very strong hitter to the ball off the tee. I mean, he's a big man and he hits the ball a long distance. I would say after the year 2000, when he's finishes his second term, he's probably bring that handicap down to single figures. And
just finally, he's ended on a relaxed note. Overall, what would be your assessment of his time north and south of the border here?
Well, I think that certainly his visit to the north was very worthwhile and very timely. It was a difficult visit in terms of the visit to Omagh, which the horrendous difficulties in the north since the bombing. His visit to the Springvale campus, for example, is very important. That's a very important project for Northern Ireland. Bill Clinton has done an awful lot for the peace process, and I think it was right that he came north and south on this occasion, and it's a further catalyst, I believe, in what we're all trying to achieve.
Dick Spring, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Well, we can now go back to the Highland Games at Bremer and a report on the visit of the royal family.
The Bremer Gathering is the jewel in the crown of the Highland Games circuit. The traditional heavy events and sports attract thousands of visitors from Scotland and overseas. But the Games were cancelled last year amid considerable controversy, when the organising committee decided that on the day of Princess Diana's funeral, few had an appetite for sports. Today, though, the crowds had returned, once more hoping for a glimpse of the royal family. The Games are back as noisy and colourful as ever, but there will be few here who don't reflect, if only for a moment, on why last year's event had to be cancelled. Just after 3 o'clock, royal and Bremer tradition resumed once more, with the arrival of the royal party from Balmoral. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, regular supporters of the gathering, were the first to be welcomed. The Queen and Duke were joined by the Queen Mother, escorted carefully into her usual place in the Royal Pavilion. Last year has not been forgotten, but Bremer has again resumed its place in the royal calendar.
And staying with things royal, the fighting, drinking and arguing amongst groups of mourners at Princess Diana's funeral will be shown in a documentary this evening. A year after the event brought the nation to a standstill, the Fly on the Wall programme, The Princess's People, presents an alternative vision of the day Diana was buried.
The night before the funeral, and mourners are jostling for the best vantage point.
We've been brilliant all day, we've good atmosphere, everybody's talking. Everybody...
Oh no, get out of it! Get out of it! Get out of it!
You're in there, why can't we all come in here?
Because we've been in here all
day.
Another fight! It's a fight! It's another fight!
They aren't perhaps the traditional images associated with the day Britain mourned the loss of Diana, Princess of Wales. And as opinion polls throw up diverging pictures of how Britain has been affected by her death, the programme shows that there wasn't an entirely reverential air amongst all those present.
If you don't have a laugh, what's the point of coming? I know it's a funeral, everyone will be crying their eyes out later when she turns up. Let's have a beer.
Not exactly the view of the majority, but with so many waiting, there were tensions within the huge crowd.
We had to shout for help. Did you hear us shouting for help? We could have took advantage and come in ourselves, but we were just pushed in because the police walked away. And there was a password to get in, which was sponge pudding.
So then, sorry, I'm getting a bit confused here. You were in the area.
Get away! Fire break!
We got the password, didn't we? What you had to have in here, sponge pudding, and we only let people who said sponge pudding.
An extraordinary day that touched millions, but a year on it's clear not everyone was affected in quite the same way. David Sillito, BBC News.
Yeah, exactly.
Quick look at the Sunday papers. The Observer leads with Trimble puts his faith in the IRA, the First Minister confident that weapons will be destroyed in return for Assembly power. That's was printed before I think we knew about the meeting with Gerry Adams that's scheduled for next week. The Sunday Times has the same picture of President Clinton waving at the crowds, but its lead story is Brown slashes Queen's pay rise. Gordon Brown is to cut the Queen's annual pay rise by 2/3, the paper says. And the Mail leads with a royal story as well. Plan to abolish powers of the Queen. This is a reference to the report that Jenny Bond carried earlier in our programme. Radical plans for the virtual abolition of the monarchy's traditional constitutional powers will be unveiled this week by a think tank with strong links to Prime Minister Tony Blair. And the Sunday Mirror also goes with the report that's out today. Let's all vote on the throne. The think tank is calling for a referendum on the future of the royal family, nation to decide if Charles should be king. The Sunday Telegraph has a different sort of picture of President Clinton at yesterday in Ireland. Worlds apart. Have the Clintons ever looked worse than this? Finally, the news of the world. They have a scoop. Drugs baron sits in House of Lords. They claim that the 10th Earl of Hardwicke, Lord Joseph Philip Sebastian York, is today exposed as a baron, a drugs baron. And now, the weather with Helen Willets.
Hello there, good morning. It was disappointingly wet and dull for many southern and eastern areas of England yesterday. The rain came and it stayed, but the good news is the low pressure that brought that rain has moved away for today and it promises to be drier and brighter. So better prospects of some decent playing weather at Lord's today. Just a small probability of a shower, and that I think later in the day. But you may have noticed that deep area of low pressure rushing into western areas. Here it is closer up. That promises some windy weather, certainly for the western side of the British Isles. Some gales too, and plenty of showers rolling in on those winds as well. There they are, circulating around the area of low pressure, the largest arrows in the west, and as a consequence of those winds already we've had cancellations of some ferry services, Cork to Swansea, possible delays Fishguard to Rosslare. It may be worth checking on CFAX before you set out if you are travelling during today. Now through the night we've seen that rain in eastern areas clearing away, but the clear skies, the light winds, the perfect recipe for mist to form, and it has been doing so, and thickening up into some fog as well, mostly in eastern and central areas, because further west the winds have started to pick up and the first showery bursts of rain evident on the radar picture. So in the morning, central and eastern areas could well have a problem with some fog patches around. They may take a time to clear and cause some difficult driving conditions, but they will eventually do so. And for central and eastern areas, a fine start, some hazy sunshine, plenty of dry weather around. That's away from the northeastern coast, that is. But further west, as I mentioned already, some showery bursts of rain, and they'll continue to develop and push their way steadily northwards and eastwards as we head through the morning. Still, for many eastern areas, it may actually stay dry for many parts for much of the day. Those showers probably not arriving until late in the afternoon, even into the evening. But by then, the afternoon anyway, we'll see some perhaps more persistent rain up the western side of Scotland. And also those showers turning heavier as the day goes on. Could be the odd rumble of thunder, even some more lengthy showers or spells of rain coming in from the southwest as we head towards this evening. Now in the east, with a little bit of sunshine and despite a little bit more breeze, muggy at 23 and quite warm, but rather cool still with onshore breezes in the north and east, and those winds in the west, quite a feature and taking the edge off the temperatures. Those winds quite gusty, I think, as well as very strong, gusting perhaps up to 45, if not more, 45 miles an hour, that is, in the southwest. And then as we head towards Monday, we've got that low pressure still in charge, still some squally winds around. In fact, it's a case of sunshine and squally showers. In fact, some of those showers heavy with hail and thunder. So just a reminder, if you are out travelling this morning on the roads, patchy fog may well be reducing the visibility, causing some difficult driving conditions, more especially, I think, in eastern and central areas.
Minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day.
7 days was all she wrote, kind of ultimatum note she gave to me.
The world is changing.
She gave to me.
Saturday at 4:30, it's your chance to catch up on the events of the last week as reported by the BBC. The last 7 days on News 24 and BBC One. Don't let the world pass you by.
I can watch anything, from behind the scenes at BBC Drama to Glastonbury on the BBC's new channel, BBC Choice.
I can keep up with BBC News 24 hours a day.
I can surf between the TV and the internet. Well, I've got to keep up with the gossip, haven't I?
And one day, everything will be in widescreen, not just the movies.
I'll be able to see radio.
I'll even be able to interact with my television. Could you pass the salt, please, darling?
It's all jolly exciting, isn't it?
BBC Digital. The adventure starts here. Call us for more information.
This is BBC News, broadcasting to the United Kingdom and around the world. The headlines. Northern Ireland's main Protestant party agrees to face-to-face talks between its leader and the head of the IRA's political wing. President Clinton says his final goodbye to Ireland and returns to the US to face the music over the Lewinsky saga. And investigators release details of the last conversation the Swiss Air pilot had with controllers before his plane crashed off the coast of Canada. Hello, I'm Roger Finn. More new ground has been broken in the politics of peace in Northern Ireland. David Trimble, the province's First Minister, will go ahead with a first face-to-face meeting next week with Sinn Féin's Gerry Adams. The decision was taken after a meeting today of his Ulster Unionist Party executive. It came after a week in which Mr Adams declared violence a thing of the past, and on the day a 29th victim of the Omagh bomb died in hospital.
As both Ulster Unionist leader and the First Minister in Northern Ireland's new Assembly, David Trimble didn't need the formal permission of his party's 110-strong executive to go ahead with a meeting with Sinn Féin. Nevertheless, it was important for him to consult the Ulster Unionist ruling body, and afterwards one senior member claimed not a single dissenting voice was raised.
We all want to see stable government. We all want to see peace returned to Northern Ireland. There is a contribution that Gerry Adams can make, and we want to make sure that that is done.
The Unionists remain adamant that Sinn Féin shouldn't be allowed to take part in a future devolved government without the destruction of IRA arms. Some expressed concern about the one-to-one meeting, which is likely to take place on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Well, I'm unhappy with the bilateral meeting, I have to say, because I feel that Sinn Féin have to do a lot more than just say in words that they are going to do something, because if you come from where I come from, you need more than words to blur out what they have been doing over the past 30 years.
So while some Unionists clearly have strong reservations, the stage is now set for another symbolic handshake and another important step in Northern Ireland's peace process. But if the process continues, so do the repercussions of the recent dreadful violence. Today, a 61-year-old man critically injured in last month's Omagh bomb died in hospital. Businessman Sean McGrath is the 29th victim of the bombing.
He was quiet, unassuming, quiet, very, very pleasant, very dignified man, very generous man.
Tonight in Portadown, the security forces moved in to disperse a crowd of loyalists who responded by setting fire to a Catholic-owned business. The disturbances aren't linked to recent political developments, but are the result of continuing tensions in the town ever since the controversial Drumcree Orange Order Parade was blocked in July. Nevertheless, they illustrate once again the scale of the task which faces those trying to bridge Northern Ireland's sectarian divide. Mark Devonport, BBC News, Belfast.
Earlier, I asked journalist Eamon Malley what form the meeting between Mr Trimble and Mr Adams would take.
Well, the aspiration, as I understand it, of Mr Trimble in his capacity as First Minister is that that meeting would take place probably Tuesday or Wednesday. I suspect the logistics, etc., are being worked out currently. But the current flowing through the particular meeting today, the Unionist executive, was this: that while Mr Trimble, in his capacity as First Minister and with the blessing of the executive of the Ulster Unionist Party, is free to meet Gerry Adams and his Sinn Féin delegation, the bottom line is he will tell them there will be no involvement of Sinn Féin personnel in a shadow executive or government without guns starting to flow in advance. That's what Mr Trimble gave a guarantee about to the executive. He said, I will not have these people in government without guns, and the executive said, that is our position, we will be holding you to it.
It's going to be a highly charged meeting, isn't it? David Trimble almost seems to bristle every time he sees Gerry Adams, and I understand he said he won't shake Gerry Adams's hand. It's going to be an extraordinary personal encounter, isn't it?
I would have thought so. And interestingly, you know, I have used this verb myself about Mr Trimble bristling each time that he sees Mr Adams. When he was addressing the gathering at the waterfront during President Clinton's visit here in the past 48 hours, when he was saying it's hard to reconcile people seeking participation or positions in government whilst illegal organisations are failing to dismantle. He was looking directly down at both Mr. Adams and Mr. McGuinness. He simply doesn't like these people. He doesn't really have a chemistry with them, and it's going to be a very frosty encounter. And I'm told by aides close to Mr. Trimble, he will be unambiguous on Monday when he meets all the party leaders, including Gerry Adams, in a general meeting, simply saying there must be guns or else there will be no government. And he'll repeat that message when he comes face to face with the Sinn Féin delegation, probably Tuesday or Wednesday.
Will this meeting go beyond decommissioning? I mean, will there be a chance to discuss other matters as well? And what matters do you think might come up?
Well, we don't know that yet. The main message, as I understand it, coming from Mr. Trimble will be, guns are no place in government for you. Now, if that is the position adopted, I mean to say, despite everything that President Clinton said, despite what Tony Blair said, etc., we are really heading for a crisis here. There is a view out there within the unionist leadership, within the executive, that there will have to be guns. I'm not necessarily of the opinion that that reflects the whole opinion within the unionist community. I think there's more flexibility there. There's a desire to see things move quickly, and people are aspirational, I think, more aspirational about guns than actually in anticipation or expecting of guns in the short term. There's another thing. The fact is that Mr. Trimble is playing it long. I think that he will try and keep this decision about forming a shadow executive as far down the line as possible. There is a visit, for example, to America in October. So all of these will be used as buffers or as comfort zones to delay the appointment of a shadow executive. I think that's the way that Mr. Trimble wants to play it.
President Clinton has ended his visit to Ireland with a speech praising the peace settlement. He told a huge crowd in Limerick not to let the enemies of peace break their will.
For the President and the First Lady, it's been an extremely difficult time. But in Limerick, scandal and growing political difficulties in America counted for little. And that's been true during the whole of this visit, north and south of the border in Ireland. The tragedy of the Omagh bombing, though, transformed the tone and nature of most of this visit. The Taoiseach somberly reflected on the death toll.
I would like that everybody here in Limerick would join with me in passing on our condolences and our sympathies to the relatives of the 29th victim of the Omagh bombing who died just a few hours ago. We send our respects to this family on their sad loss.
Mr. Ahern thanked the President for his really brilliant help in the peace process. And Mr. Clinton once again said that was a shining example to other conflicts around the world.
Because of what you have done in Ireland in 1998, you have made it possible for me, on behalf of the United States and the cause of peace in the world, to tell every warring, feuding, hating group of people trapped in the prison of their past conflicts to look at Ireland and know there can be a better day. Thank you for that.
This visit has not been the complete break it might have been for the Clintons from all the recent difficulties. But for most people in Ireland, those have not been the point. This President helped produce the Good Friday Agreement, and here, that's more than good enough. But in America, the President's apology here over the Monica Lewinsky affair is probably what will be remembered. Heading home tonight, the Clintons know there'll be more difficult times ahead. Dennis Murray, BBC News, Dublin.
So what sort of reception can President Clinton expect from his critics on his return to the United States? A question I put to our correspondent, Richard Lister.
Well, it has to be said, I think the President's going to look back on his few days in Ireland as among the happiest he's going to have in several months to come, I should think. He's basically got several battles lined up that he's expected to fight. The first, of course, is the Ken Starr report, which is expected to come out before the end of the month, which may or may not recommend that he be impeached. So he's got to start preparing the groundwork for that and decide how he's going to fight that battle. More immediately, he's also got to think about how he's going to tackle the budget crisis, which is rapidly developing here here, because the Congress has not actually agreed on a budget. They're waiting until the final few weeks of this congressional session, and President Clinton and the leaders in the Republican House of Representatives and in the Republican Senate have all made clear they've got quite different priorities.
What's extraordinary is how his own party seems to have turned against him, or at least some members of it. It's almost unheard of for that to happen, and for that to happen when the president is abroad as well.
Well, of course, we have to remember that this is also an election year for many members of Congress, and certainly Democrats who are up for re-election in November really are trying to do as much as they can to distance themselves from the president. They realize that if the Democratic voters of this country feel so fatigued by this scandal that they don't turn out on election day in November, then they're not simply going to be re-elected, or it's going to be more difficult for these Democrats to be re-elected. So they are trying to distance themselves, and yes, there have been some very strong words said about the president by members of his own party. I think he would have been quite hurt by the remarks from Senator Joe Lieberman, who was a long-standing friend. President Clinton has actually worked on his re-election campaigns, and yet he said that what he did was morally unconscionable, and he made all kinds of remarks that said basically President Clinton effectively was not a fit president. So yes, I think this is going to be a difficult time for the president within his own party.
What's the feeling there? Can he survive? Is there a real chance that he could be impeached?
I think it all comes down to what Ken Starr says in his report. I think if the president is able to stick to his line that really this is a personal matter, he didn't lie, he told the truth, if only in a technical sense, to those lawyers when he was asked for his version of events with Paula Jones and with Monica Lewinsky. If he can stick by his story, and if Ken Starr is unable to find anything compelling which says that he lied and he knew he was lying, and there is evidence to back it up that he was by no stretch of the imagination even technically telling the truth, then the president is in a lot of trouble. But I think Democrats don't want to see him go. I think they're quite happy to see him reprimanded. But